Right. Hello, everyone. So it is about 5:34. So I see a couple other people are joining us, but I'm going to guess that most people who are going to be here are already here. So just a quick reminder, if you haven't already been muted by me, please mute yourself for now. We will do a brief Q&A session later where you can unmute yourself, but just for the sake of audio feedback and things like that, it's better if everybody stays muted for the majority of the presentation. So thank you all for being here. I am really excited to have our second virtual artist talk here at Gross McCleaf Gallery. I am the assistant director, Morgan Hobbs, and I'm just going to run through a couple announcements and then I'll get right to introducing our artist. So just so you know, the 3 exhibitions that we have up right now that include Max Mason Skylight, Natasha Doss Thread, and a group of mini solo shows called Short and Sweet. They close in 9 days on the 29th. So if you haven't been in here yet to see the exhibitions in person, definitely stop by the gallery. If you've never been here before, that would be great for you to finally come. We're in the middle of Center City at 127 South 16th Street. So we'd be really pleased to see you. We also have 3 new exhibitions beginning June 2nd. We have Rebecca Callaghan. Her exhibition is titled Daytime, Clear Kincaid with Changing Spaces, and a group show called Pet Show, which is all works that feature people's pets. So next month should be really fun as well. So for tonight, anyway, we will start the talk with a set of slides, and then Max Mason will introduce some of the work that's within the gallery space. And during that time, I'll have to move the camera a couple times. So just a pre-warning that there'll be a moment where I shift the camera to another spot. We will get settled down and hopefully stabilize the camera very soon after making that shift. And then at the end of the talk, Max will be doing a musical presentation. So definitely stick around for that. So, all right. So, born in 1952, Max Mason grew up in the Boston area. He attended Belmont High School and then Vassar College, where he graduated in 1975 with a degree in geology. After some adventures, Mason moved to Philadelphia to study with landscape painter Neil Welliver at the University of Pennsylvania. He had his first one-person show of large landscape paintings at Gross McCleaf Gallery in 1986. Soon after, he began painting baseball subjects and had a one-person show at the Butler Institute of American Art in 1992. In 2004, he was commissioned by the Philadelphia Phillies to do a number of paintings and murals for their new ballpark. He has exhibited internationally and has had over 20 one-person shows nationwide. Mason is represented by Gross McCleaf Gallery in Philadelphia and will have his second one-person show at the Butler Institute very soon, sometime this spring. He's also a musician and performs with his daughter, Margaret, as well as the power swing band called the After Dinner Mints. He released his first album, Social Security, in 2020. Wow. He and his wife live in Wynwood, PA. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Max Mason to the stage and switch over to a PowerPoint presentation. So yay, Max.
Great to be here. Thank you, Morgan. So we look at some pictures that sort of set the stage, so to speak, for
I think that happens automatically when they share screen.
The first one we see is a river scene, which of course relates to a lot of the paintings that are in the show now. And this is the river scene I painted when I first came to Philadelphia. And it shows a kind of a very studious approach to landscape painting. and very compositionally based, but things changed pretty dramatically from this point under the influence of my teacher, Neil Welber. There's a slide of his coming up. We'll look at that a little bit later. The next one is a painting of that same spot after being in school. And no, I was not taking any mind-altering substances. I would get up early and go and paint the sunrise. And for some reason, the straight, flat horizon didn't seem like it fully captured the experience of being at the spot. I felt like if I looked left, things would drop off in one way. If I looked right or up and down, so it has a kind of a fisheye lens approach. That was fun, but maybe a little bit jarring. And I continued to do paintings from life. It was very important that I would be there looking at it as I painted. And the next one is a very large painting. My teacher, Neil Welber, painted 8-foot by 8-foot paintings. And I was really, really very influenced by him. And this was painted from the roof of our house in West Philadelphia. And I've sort of, the horizon is flattened out, but the influence of light and composition in space, deep space, has always been an interest of mine. And this is a painting that shows all of those things. Let's see, in front of the next one, Morgan. Oh, there we go. Wow, this is not by me. This is by a Western painter named Maynard Dixon. And as I got older, I really was taken by the more slightly illustrational, pictured storytelling abilities of some of the Western painters, and also the painters from the 30s that were happening with the WPA project. Painters like Thomas Hart Benton and the guy who did the painting of the old couple with the pitchfork. What's that one called? American Gothic.
Hopper.
No, it is. It'll come to me, of course. At some later point in the night. But the scale. It's the scale, the space, the depth, and I love the clarity of these, and that began to infuse my work as well. So what's the next one there? God, yes, this is a painting, contemporary painting by a man named Tom Utek, who takes that, not the imagery, but the scale and the dynamism of that last image and makes it into a visionary painting, takes it into the realm of the imagined, where all of those animals that are, it's like he painted every animal that ever flew through that space, every bird, and it's hard to see, it's dark, but there's bears and there's all sorts of, this is like 12-foot by 12-foot painting. So I love the idea that you have a flat, static image and yet it comes alive with time and deep space, and ends up with all that action. Contemplated. So,
Hold on a second. If you don't mind, go ahead and hit mute at the bottom left of your screen. Somebody is giving us feedback right now. Thank you.
okay, good?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So this painting blew me away, and I was actually very influenced. When we come back to me live here in the show, we'll see a painting that the influence is very obvious. So why don't we do that? Can we go live? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So here is the painting, and this is called Cliff Swallows Over the Missouri. And it speaks to a number of issues that the show is concerned with. One is the subject of the Midwestern landscape. My family, both sides, came from Missouri. And even though I grew up in the Boston area, my roots, my deep family roots, go back to the Midwest. I was a beloved child of my grandparents that were in suburban St. Louis, and there's a farm still in the family out, and I go there, and I paint and I sketch, and this is from one of the trips I took. The painting was done from memory and from sketches, and the river had flooded, and there was a hatch, and it was evening, and there was a hatch of mayflies.
Turn up your volume a little bit.
Okay,
We're saying
yes.
we can't hear you.
Okay, sorry, thank you. There was a hatch of mayflies, and the cliff swallows that lived on these cliffs over the Missouri were just going insane. And it just made for the most fabulous image. But of course, it was an image full of action. And how do you put that in? Well, you have to exaggerate the number of birds. Because, in fact, there couldn't have been this many birds like flying all together. But the effect of putting them all in at different scales and different directions is trying to create a sense of life and bird life and just the living, the marvelous miracle of creation. And then to put that in the context of a very transitory light situation. So you're dealing with eternal aspects and you're dealing with temporal aspects simultaneously. And you can do that in painting. I think that's one of the things you can do. It actually opens a door to opportunity to have a still image and yet have it contain that kind of deep space, a sense of time because of the birds and the fact that the sun is set and you're in that twilight period. And then, of course, the sense of the land and the permanence of the land with the rocks. So I had no idea how this painting was going to turn out when I started it. So that's a part of the adventure of it. You don't know. And you have to, painting has to discover itself by working on it and by changing it and having it come alive in your own head. A lot of the images in the show are manufactured in that way. They are constructed, they're built in a way. You have an idea, and you put things up. I guess you're building though without a plan, without an architecture plan, because you're not sure how it's going to turn out. Some things work, some things don't. But the final images end up, in my painting, being pretty calm and ordered. And so that's a part of the dynamic for me in the studio is to start off with something that is so chaotic in experience and then make order out of it, sort of put a layer of order and organization out of it. I don't know, can we move the slide a little bit over here to this other painting, which is similar and obviously still emphasizing the sky. But the sense of the land out there is of the sky pressing down on the land. The sky, obviously it does have all that humidity in it, especially in the summer. But the tendency, of course, is to paint a lot of the stuff on the ground and have the sky be more background. But I wanted the sense of the weight of the sky pressing down on the land. So the forms that you see, the side of the corn that is almost ready for harvest. The soybeans are still green, and that's the way it is. The corn, you plant the corn first, you harvest the corn first, and the beans are later. Of course, there's also the sense of the grid of the roads and the fields. So it's like when you're flying, you look down and you see this checkerboard of the square miles. And it's like a map, it's like a plan. And it's the actual land. And so it's fun to play with the grid in terms of the perspective and all the angles that are made when you're looking at a perspective grid from low down. So that becomes an opportunity. Now this place does exist, kind of, but it's just a road, and there's another painting of it in the show from a different angle. But I pretty much made up everything, you know, in the sense that it was the idea of it all that is what I wanted to paint. And the sky came from a sketch I did, And this same sky appears in several of these paintings, but it looks all very different. I don't know that you notice it's the same sky. But that's something you can do in painting, is you can switch things out. Use a different bottom, a different ground, and a different sky. The other thing I do like to do is I like to put contemporary references. So it's not just about the old pure farmland. There's a couple of nuclear power plant stacks over there. And of course there's up close, you have to come into the gallery to see the little pencil lines for the phone poles and the street signs, and there is stuff in there. There's usually a flock of birds someplace, but this one doesn't actually have one. Most of them do actually have birds, someplace in the paintings. So that's fun for me. If we can swing it around here, this is another good example of, it's a wintertime scene obviously, but I didn't actually observe this. This is pretty much a made up painting from a smaller sketch I did where the road hasn't been covered over completely by the snow. It snowed a little bit, maybe an inch or two, but you know, you can just all of a sudden well, let's make the snow deeper. Let's cover up all those ruts in the road. Let's make it be like a blizzard, right? And so we have the fence, the fence line here with the wire, and you just use a pencil to make those, and they look so dramatic against that white background. And of course, the deep space with the phone poles, the mailbox, and the little bits of grass poking up from the snow. But it gives, I should have somebody else say this, but I like the way it sort of has a sense of stillness, and yet it seems just very full of light. It's sort of glowing. So the snow is a great way to get that kind of effect in the painting. I guess can we bring up that slide of my father's painting, Morgan? Because we here, we're going to go back to, we're going to see, we'll touch on these kind of paintings. It was the very first one. So it was a painting, a watercolor by my father. There we go. Not only did we go to Missouri, it was a very, a very, very happy childhood. And so I would go with my parents up to Maine on an island, and he would spend all day, every day, pretty much, just walking around and doing these expressionistic watercolors from life. And that made a huge impression on me because, first of all, he was just so happy. He was so happy being outside doing it. And he'd come back with this big, like half a dozen paintings he did in an afternoon. And I put him around the house, and he didn't select the best ones. They were all the same to him. He was a true Democrat. And so they were equally good. And he had so many of them that we've had to go through them all and pull out the good ones. And this is a terrific one, I think. And it really does capture the experience of being in that Maine coast with the wind and the cold water and maybe bugs, and everything. So that is, I, however, have always been more attracted, not more attracted, but attracted to contemplative things. Like the next slide shows a painting done by George Caleb Bingham, who was born and grew up in a town very nearby where our farm was and still is in Missouri. And this is obviously an incredibly contemplative painting. And it also has that moody spirit and light that I've actually tried to emulate in a lot of my work. There's something about the timeless quality of this work, with the way the figures relate to the landscape, the glowing light, and the river, talking about or speaking to issues of time and travel. So let's see, what else can we talk about in the show, Morgan? Do you think there's a particular piece that would be of interest to the audience?
Do you want to switch to the other side?
Sure, we want to go over to the other side
All
of the
right.
gallery here.
We're going to switch to the other side of the gallery. if anybody has any concerns about hearing, thank you for those who typed into the chat bar. You can continue to do that. I know it's a little echoey in here, so, but I'll just tell Max to speak up if I see that again. So
Okay.
thank you. All right.
Thank you, Marie. Yes, this is the largest piece in the show, and I call it Missouri River Bottomlands, because down at along the river winds around in that classic oxbows, and in between the oxbows are these great flat passages of land. You've got the perspective grid and the fields with the various crops and cows sometimes, and the land floods periodically. And in fact, there's some paintings of the flooded land in the show. And the land is the most valuable land there is along the Missouri because it is the most nutritious for the plants. It's full of the nutrients from the periodic floods. And so there's just always great agriculture going on down there. And this, again, is a manufactured painting in the sense that the image doesn't actually exist. I mean, the place doesn't actually exist. It's the different parts of it are taken from different sketches and paintings. And again, the same thing with the sky. The sky is just such an active part of the landscape. It seethes and moves and twists. And it's in this one more than the other one, some of the gestural quality of the brushwork speaks to that. And the way the water is painted is kind of invented, but the way the light and the shadows create these compositional opportunities is a huge part of what makes it a lot of fun for me to make it up and then suddenly have it come alive in a different kind of a way because of the shapes of the shadows and leading your eye back. The idea that there's almost always a road or a river in these paintings, and so you're taken back. Very traditional 19th century, well, earlier than that, of course, the Flemish painters, the Van Ruysdael, the great sky painters of Holland in the 1600s, or 1700s, I'm sorry. I might be wrong about that, late 16, early 17, something like that. So people always like cows. It's always good to put all you young painters out there. Cows are always good in a painting. And these are belted Galloways, and they're particularly festive, so to speak. Now, the farmers that have these cows, of course, these are not dairy cows. These are steak, yeah, right, steak, meat, food, and of course, milk is food too. But friends like to call these Oreo cows. So we just sort of stuck them in there and tried to create a natural rhythm, as with the birds. Try to create a natural rhythm so it looks natural, but your eye is actually moving around, taking them all in. And one of the nice things about working on this scale is you can slip in small things, and they reward close looking. There's actually a guy on his tractor here, and he's wearing a straw hat, and there's we've got several flocks of birds here. We've got crows around the silo there. So you got fishing over there. I know you can't probably see it on the screen, but come to the show and get up close, and you can discover things in all these paintings. Got some loons over here in the pond, but it really is a joy for me to try to create these sort of utopian spaces, and I like to think they're contemplative, and yet they reward hard looking as well. So while on the surface they may appear peaceful, there's a lot of tension looking at the various sizes and shapes, the pressing together of the fields and the tree lines, the way the roads bisect them periodically, trying not to have it be too symmetrical, so there's always a nice syncopated rhythm about everything. this painting is kind of culmination. There's a grain elevator here that's similar to the grain elevator over there. I just thought it'd be nice to have it in there. It has some nice man-made architectural type shapes to balance all the organic shapes off of. That kind of sums up that one. If anybody has any questions or anything, we can move into that portion of things.
So definitely either unmute yourself or you can type into the chat box down below if you have questions. I'll get things started because I have a couple questions for Max. So I'm interested to hear a little bit more about how you choose the subject matter for your works, because I know that you have painted a few different kinds of subjects. And is there something about those subjects that is thematic for you? Are they similar in your mind? How do you choose them?
Well, it's the familiarity of intimate ground is what I like to think of it is important to me. I'm not really a painter of exotic places. I have done that occasionally, but what I like to do is paint someplace that I know well, and not maybe realistically, but it starts off that way with a sketch or I find it. I'm there, I'm walking around, I'm just being there, and suddenly there's the painting. It like hits you. It's like, oh, wow, look at that. And you either remember to do a quick sketch, take a little photograph, and then that painting evolves from there. That's the starting place. It's kind of like a song is like that, where you have a phrase or a chord sequence that just like jogs you, and then you build it from there. I always think of it like a pond in the wintertime or the fall, where the water is below freezing because it's been so still, nothing has stirred it that creates the molecule, that enables the molecules to link together. You toss a pebble out into that pond, and the whole thing will be put together almost like a puzzle, only it will happen fairly quickly. And the paintings often are like that, where it starts off with a small crystal of an idea, and then it builds out from there. And of course, a lot of that has to do with how big your canvas is that you started out. And maybe it'll start out a small one, and then if it comes out well, then you do a larger one from the smaller one. And sometimes they're similar, never, I would say almost never exactly the same, but certainly very related and inspired by.
Yeah. That's interesting. I'm like fascinated to hear the way that you're talking about your paintings, because me coming from them, and of course we all bring our own story to each painting and our own personal baggage. But I always think of Americana when I think of your work, or like kind of childlike wonder, and maybe I'm emotional or something like that, but I think of an emotional connection.
There's this always a conversation that some art criticism is very verbose and like reading dense philosophy, and I've always gravitated to the more prosaic and more easily digested kinds of things. And I don't believe they're necessarily less profound because they're easily explained, but there's a little bit of illustration in my work for sure. And I often think if I had been born maybe when illustration was still a huge commercial enterprise, newspapers and magazines were all hand-drawn illustrations instead of photography, I may have gravitated in that direction. Because I do, and that is work I truly do love, is the great illustration, the era of great illustration from the 20s and 30s. Maxfield Parrish, Rockwell Kent, and Maynard Dixon did a lot of that as well.
Yeah, I can definitely see the influence of them in your work for sure. Let me see if anybody in the chat bar has any questions yet. Oh, Don Jones said great stuff.
Hey, Don.
So, what about, like, you've talked about how these paintings are sort of constructed, and I'm also interested in the fact that you have kind of a science background. I don't know if that is still a part of your work.
That's what I loved about geology, was climbing up on the mountain and looking out at all the landforms. As soon as I went to the University of Wyoming in order to and was analyzing drill logs from oil companies, I realized that it was science. It wasn't just looking around and seeing how the glaciers moved the rock masses around or whatever. And so that started my academic career toward taking art classes, actually, because I left geology having enjoyed it, but realizing this wasn't going to be for me for the rest of my life. So I started taking art classes at Vassar College, and was just thrilled by it. I just jumped into it and took it from there, and then came to Philadelphia to study with Neil Oliver.
Yeah. That's amazing. So I wrote this in my notes for you. Do you have a favorite kind of cloud?
I no. I will say absolutely no. Every kind of sky certainly can be interesting in its own way, but I don't have a favorite. I mean, I do like those. I feel like we see them a lot in paintings in New Mexico and up in House and Santa Fe, the sort of big, high, bubbling clouds. So you know what? I take it back. Those are my favorite clouds. The big, tumbling white, with a dark violet bottom, and then the showers of rain coming down, and you see across the prairie or the desert, the shadows of the clouds on the ground. It's very romantic, and but it uplifts the heart. I mean, it just makes you feel very small on a big landscape, a big world. That's I do. That might be it's an Asian principle in art, is to have the people be small and have the world be big, because that was more of what their world experience was. And I think Western art concentrates more on having the people occupy the dominant place in the painting, especially those French academic paintings, where it's all architecture having to do with the composition, how the figures all work with each other. And those are fun to look at, but everything, of course, is a contradiction, because then if you look at my baseball paintings, they have a lot of that. They have a lot of the way the figures work together, have an architectural relationship. But these paintings are not that way.
I have a question, if I may ask.
Yes.
So I know you best for your baseball paintings, or at least they're the ones I'm most familiar with. Many of them appear to be at Connie Mack Stadium, but I'm guessing you came to Philadelphia after that was gone. So I'm just wondering how your context of painting the stadium.
No, I know. No, that was I'm very sorry. I didn't see old Yankee Stadium. I made a road trip and saw some of the other old stadiums, Detroit Tiger Stadium, Cleveland Municipal Stadium, before they went, and I'm very glad I did. But yeah, I was in Boston going to Fenway Park, and so and then out in Missouri, sometimes we go to see the Cardinals in St. Louis.
Thanks.
We've got a question in the chat bar here from Barbara McDonald. How do you compare the sky in your Philly paintings with Missouri and with Maine?
Oh, that's a great question, Barbara. Well, you go out to Missouri and it hits you like a hammer. It's like getting off. I always loved getting off the plane before we had those things, the walkways that would come down. They come down now.
Can we see Max, please? We're seeing Ira's video there.
So you should be
There.
able to.
Thank you. It's
Yeah.
all set.
All right.
And that was my question, Max.
And Ira's looking good, by the way. Yes. But the sky maybe it's partly the humidity. Philadelphia does not. They're gorgeous days, obviously, and some days are like Midwest days, and some days are like Maine days. You know what? I'm kind of, again, I'm taking it back, because when I think about it, there's something about the humidity and the kind of a yellowness, a sulfurous kind of quality to the Philadelphia light, having to do with the industry, probably the pollution from the population. It's also kind of in a bowl with the two rivers, Schuylkill and the Delaware River coming down. So there's a Philadelphia light, But the main light, of course, is crisp and clear and sharp edged. But the Missouri light is the expansive quality of it, the amount of it, gives it a whole different sense of importance in your experience out there. I guess how I would describe it. So there's, yeah, these places all have different, and I do think also we're always influenced by where we are from our own personal relationships point. Are we with strangers? Are we with family? The sky, I think, actually looks different if you're with family as opposed to when you're with strangers. You know, it's just like the human nature is like that. So, but there's certainly more of it in Missouri. So that's what I try to have. I try to put it out in the paintings.
We've got another question in the chat bar. Do you do a lot of plein air? How do you play with the light in your paintings? And is there a particular time of day you prefer the light?
You know, that's a great question because you get older, it's harder. And I used to be up at dawn. I used to be, I was, for a while I was doing paintings at night outside the Bartram's Gardens, which is, you know, I mean, it was, you had to keep your wits about you. We heard rustling behind you, you definitely, like, your heart started to beat a little bit. I do still do plein air paintings. I had a couple shows before this of all statues that were all done plein air, Philadelphia statues. And that was fun, but I have to admit, I was truly exhausted by the end of doing those paintings. I was probably getting a little dehydrated and I wasn't putting a big enough hat on or something. But it takes a toll. I know some people, I know Larry Francis, I think, I saw Larry earlier, he's outside all the time. And God bless him. I love those paintings. It's fabulous. But I've gotten a little more used to being inside, being out for shorter periods of time, and then coming in and using that information in a more comfortable environment. And less wind, you know, the wind gets you as much as anything. You got to tie them down. And, those paintings I did on the roof, gosh, that one of those early ones I showed, I forgot. It actually once, a gust of wind came up and it blew off the top of the house down into the garden and landed face up. And I was like standing there watching the wind like take it. I was like, ah! And, but now, of course, I kind of treasure those little marks that are on there from the scratches of when it like careened across the yard. So it becomes, that's one of the things about outdoor paintings, you know. If there are painters out there, you get some poor bug that gets caught in the paint. He's like trying to row with his wings, you know, to get out of it somehow. And you have this trail going across the painting like a fossil. And that becomes a fun part of the painting, to my mind. It shows the experience of working on it. So it's a fabulous experience, but I'm doing less of it these days.
It looks like we have a comment, maybe no question here, but I'll go ahead and read it out loud for everyone. Max has also been very generous with his paintings. He has donated several baseball paintings to the fundraising efforts of the nonprofit organization Philadelphia Futures, which auctioned them off to support low-income, first-generation college Philadelphia public high school students. Wonderful generosity.
Sounds like it's from David Richmond.
Says Janet Perry.
Janet Perry, they are a long-standing, fabulous married couple with wonderful children.
Yeah. Any more questions for Max? We'll take a couple more if you have them. Otherwise, we'll move over to the music portion of the presentation.
Oh, hi, Max.
Oh, hi, Liz. Hi.
I just would like to reiterate something I've told you many times before, is that I admire your hand and your ability to work with paint. I mean, it's just, there are not many people that do it as well as you do. And I am always in awe of not only, I love the imagery. Of course, I love painting outside too, and you know, having your easel fall down into the dirt, and then you say, well, you're bringing the dirt into the painting, so that's it. But it's just, I just really admire, you have a very old school way, and yet you've brought sort of a modern, but doesn't have to admire your touch to the way you paint.
Thank you.
Wonderful way of painting.
I really appreciate Lisa is a wonderful artist in several genres of her own, in her own right. And speaking of the Southwest, has done many paintings of the Southwest, and especially horses.
Gibson.
Horses. We have a sculpture of hers of a horse made out of feathers, and she's done a lot of those as well. It's truly spectacular work.
Yeah. Well, this is about you, Max, and it's a beautiful show, and love it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, what do you think, Morgan?
One more
One
question.
more question.
Elizabeth Heller wants to know which greens you use.
Elizabeth, that is a great question. In fact, it's such a great question. I'm gonna sit down because you guys, all you art students out there will appreciate it. I'm sort of in the dark, okay? Greens are tough. My dad loved cadmium green as a watercolor because it stayed soft. Well, in watercolors, some of the paints are very hard and some of them are really soft. So it really mattered, not the color, the texture of the paint. So that's it's another thing to deal with. And I've always, being a landscape painter, used a lot of greens. How do you use greens? Well, there was a gallery once in Santa Fe that looked at my paintings and just looked at it and said, we don't have green in our gallery. Like, no green, right? It seemed like the stupidest thing ever. I still think so. But the one of the teachers in my art school came over and once was looking at my work and goes, you don't use green very well. It was like a stab to the heart. I could be your landscape painter, but you don't use green very well. That's like saying to a poet, oh, you're not so good with words. The greens are key, but the thing is, they need to be in moderation. I don't know what it is. Elizabeth, you know this. I think you lovely, wonderful painter. Too much green doesn't communicate in a painting as green somehow. Maybe it's the simultaneous contrast of the red that it implies when you stare at green. Something about that, something scientific about green that's tough, I think. And so if you can be economical with it, although painting behind me's got kind of a boatload of it. And I'm always nervous about having too much green because of what the teacher's name was Rudy Burkhardt, who was a character. Did you remember Rudy, Lisa? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we remember Rudy.
We were quite a character is the right way to say it.
Yeah. So I appreciate that question, Elizabeth, because I struggle with it because I'm always trying to cut back on the amount of green. And then when I started to do these baseball paintings, well, the stands, of course, well, what you can do in the baseball paintings is if you're looking at the field from ground level, you don't hardly see any green because it's like a line, right? You have to be up high to see the field. So that helps with the stand. So you can moderate the green by how high up you are. Trick of the trade. So that's not an answer, but it's a struggle. Okay. The question was, what greens do I use? My dad turned me onto Old Holland paints. It's a kind of a brand, and they're kind of expensive. They even keep them in a case in the art store. You have to got a guy with a lock, a woman with a lock to come and open them up. But I got addicted to like four or five of those Old Holland colors. And one of them is permanent green light. And the other green I like, and the different companies really matter because I use a Rembrandt green earth. You can't use green earth with any other company than Rembrandt for me. And then then it's just mixing with yellow ochre and various things. And but I stopped using cadmium yellow altogether. It's just too much. I don't know what it is. We all go through these things. Anyway, that's kind of getting into shop talk a little deeper. Sorry.
All right. Well, thank you all for your wonderful questions. I think we're going to go ahead and let Max do a performance. You told me earlier that these were kind of similar to your paintings, these songs related to the show?
Well, they try to really create, songs maybe do this sometimes more than other things. They're really about trying to create a sort of a oral utopia. You're sort of putting yourself in kind of a slight state of euphoria or something. The songs transport you. I think that they work well. So, and obviously we try to do that with our paintings as well. But songs are also kind of much simpler in a way to get started on, but to have something, to have a resonance and have a sense of deep connection is like almost, it's kind of impossible. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. You just try your hardest and see what happens. So, but anyway, these songs, I've got 3 of them here that really were written out there, and some of them are closely based on some of these paintings. So I just thought it'd be fun to end this whole thing on that. And I do, however, have to take care of one personal matter, is I need to lubricate my voice. So you'll hear a very familiar sound in a minute.
Take your time.
I'm not even sure this is legal, although maybe we've come out of it. Do you have a license?
Yeah.
Yes, I do. This is, of course, a soda pop. All right. Oh, there it is. Sorry. The first song is called Nothing, and it speaks to the notion of escaping one's self, one's environment, and going to some place of pure experience. And that, for me, that was going out to Missouri. And so it's called Nothing. Things are getting out of hand, even playing in the band. It's become a chore I don't look forward to. So I'm leaving town and headed west, where skies are wide and I can rest my weary mind from all it longs to. And all I'm looking forward to is nothing. Nothing's what I've got too little of. If you want to find me, just drop me a line. Or if you Missouri Avenue. Well, there's books to read and beer to drink, birds to watch and time to think. That's what I'm gonna do. Have to walk porches to sing, wheels to mow, guitars to play. That's what I'm gonna do. And somehow I got busy doing nothing. Nothing's awful hard to hold on to. If you wanna find me, just drop me a line. Or if Missouri Avenue. Dust rises from the dirt road that I can't see. First car that's been down here about a week. Sounds like a distant train reminds me of you, how I wish that you were here with me. And all we have to do is nothing. Nothing's all we want to do. If you need to find us, just drop us a line. R.I.P. Missouri Avenue. R.I.P. Missouri Avenue. R.I.P. Missouri Avenue. All right. So that's about leaving town. Here's another one about the struggle, not the struggle, just the experience of having a place in the country and living in the city and in between, the balance you have to strike. So this one is called City in the Country. And it goes like this. been living in the city, been living there my whole life. The city's been a friend, maybe who I am, where I met my wife. We got a little place, made a nest, where these two girls did our best. We got a front porch, we got a barbecue. We don't lack for much, we're truly blessed. But I still think about the country. Yes, I still dream about the West. It's a path not taken, a road not gone down. Guess I like the city best. Well, there's beauty in those silver shining buildings, like mountains pushing up against the sky. Beauty in the streets and in a simple glass of beer. Beauty of the people passing by. But sometimes this city wears you out, gets under your skin and your eyes, depresses, undresses, gets you down, makes you want to hang your head and cry. And that's when I think about the country. Yes, that's when I dream about the West. It's a path not taken, a road not gone down. And the city sure puts you to the test. But we're still living in the city, and the girls are coming over tonight. Yeah, we'll fire up the grill, sing a country song. The city sure puts you to the test. I still think about the country. Yes, I still dream about the West. It's a big old dirty town, that is where I'll be found. I guess I like the city best.
Even SEPTA?
Even SEPTA.
676.
676, give me tough.
Pretty.
Everybody likes gritty, you kidding me? Come on. Here you go, everybody at home. Here you go. All right, thank you. Oh, I see some clapping. Thank you, guys. All right, here's one that's the last one, and it's called Head in the Clouds. And so you can see we very coincidentally positioned my chair here right underneath this big sky. Guys, this is called Head in the Clouds, and I actually did write this painting. I wrote this song very recently when I was walking along a path along the Missouri River. At least the first few words came to me, which are, I've got my head in the clouds, the wind at my back. I'm looking ahead and I'm looking back. So this is called Head in the Clouds. And thank you all for being here. It's a great privilege to see some of your faces. And if you get a chance, come on down to the gallery and look at the paintings. I'll even leave some albums with Morgan, and she can distribute them liberally. Okay, this is called Head in the Clouds. Here we go. I got my head in the clouds and the wind at my back. I'm looking ahead and I'm looking back. I got gas in the tank and I got treads on my shoes. The birds in the sky are singing too. No, I'm not gonna worry about this big old world. What's going on? Well, make your hair curl. I'm out there's a sign. Open the window and enjoy the ride. Turn the radio off. deep breath and sing my own song. As there's nothing in the wide open road ahead. The sun's going down and the sky's turning red. You know we're not fixing by closing the door. It keeps on coming and there's always more. We gotta face up to it with our eyes open wide. We're not alone. We got friends by our side. So rise above and advance. Put your feet on the ground on another day. Cause my head's in the clouds and the wind my back. I'm looking ahead and I'm not looking back. Thank you so much. Come on now. That's it.
All right, well, that's it, everybody. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Max.
Oh, you're back.
Thank you,
Thank
Max.
you.
Thanks so much.
It was wonderful.
Oh, Max.
Thank you, Max.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Hey, Max.
See ya. Friends, family.